Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Should I just roll it right into my introduction?
Go for it.
So let me preface this with a caveat. I had to take an emergency trip up to Canada for 3 days. I just now walked in the door after a 4-hour drive and 3 straight days of meetings. So forgive me if this comes out disjointed or haphazard or abstract, if you will. So let me start by saying that. But I'm Dr. Karen Capuder. My current official role is as the Senior Legislative Policy Analyst for the Colville Tribes Traditional Territories Program, after having served for 10 years in the tribe's History and Archaeology program as a senior archaeologist. And I am also currently contracted with the Nisqually tribe and contracted with a couple of other tribes. But I'm going to be speaking to you tonight in my role as one of the inheritors of the traditional cultural knowledge of the late hereditary chief Salatupki Leonard Squally. I worked with Leonard very closely for 10 years and wrote my dissertation with him. And I think, Sean, was it you who had encountered or who had read my dissertation? I can't remember.
I am not all the way through, but I'm working on it.
But you're reading it, right? So, yeah, this is work that Leonard chose. Well, we kind of, fate chose us to work together on this work. And I guess I will speak on from a perspective of the cultural and spiritual significance of what I refer to in my dissertation as the Sequalitchew ancestral village landscape, which largely mirrors the watershed boundaries of Sequalitchew Creek, but also includes some additional areas as well, at least based on the WRIA map of the watershed. This landscape attained its significance in the time prior to human beings, began to attain its significance in the time prior to human beings. These glacial outwash prairie landscapes that were once quite visibly evident prior to development, hosted a wealth of traditional cultural foods, including camas, and one of the oral historical narratives about this place is that Mount Rainier once lived in the Olympic Mountains, and she was one of the wives of Mount Doshwelops. And the story goes that she became very large and angry, and so instead of continuing to fight with his other wives, Doshwelops sent her to live across the water, right? And we'll talk about that in a minute. As she traveled to her new home, she dropped salmon and camas, and she formed those glacial outwash. She implanted those plants on those glacial outwash prairies that are in Sequalitchew. They used to be known as the string of pearls that comes up from like Chehalis up through the lower Puget Sound Basin, this chain of glacial outwash prairies that are critical habitat for several traditional cultural foods, including blue camas or Camassia quamash. So this history has been, incorporated into Nisqually identity and Nisqually culture, and this place is understood as having this freestanding significance. There are also known to be spiritual beings that inhabit some of this area, most especially in these glacial lakes and the interconnected wetlands. There's particular powers and beings that are known by the people to live in these places, and still known today by contemporary cultural practitioners, to be emplaced in these features. Sorry, it's been a very, very long week. So the village of Sequalitchew itself, I can't remember the exact dates, radiocarbon dates that have been pulled out of some of the archaeological sites in and around DuPont. I believe I'm going to go with 4,700 years because that's the one that's sticking out in my mind. The oldest known shell midden in the Puget Sound area. I don't know if you know what a shell midden is, but yeah. So, and understand that these aren't garbage piles, okay? Particularly for Coast Salish peoples, there can often be burials interred in shell midden, and there can be structural elements as well. So I just want you to be aware of that. So, that's the local archaeological evidence that has thus far been encountered on this landscape. If we turn to oral history, particularly the oral histories of related Coast Salish communities such as Skokomish, where I do a lot of work, there's oral history pertaining to 4 comings of the ice, right? And the amount of geophysical modification that has taken place because of glaciation, it is quite likely that older evidence of human presence in these areas has been erased by geologic activity. So thus far, the oldest date that has been obtained in the lower Puget Sound is from a midden at Sequalitchew. What else do I want to say? So this is in the heart of Nisqually ancestral territories, or Sequalitchew ancestral territories. Okay. Very, very adjacent to the main stem Nisqually River, which of course was, the very heart. But Nisqually territory is quite vast, and of course goes up the slopes of Mount Rainier. So this was a primary village, right? One of the ways that we know this, in addition to oral history, is the Hudson's Bay Company only established their posts in heavily populated areas in order to facilitate their aims in the region. Of course, the establishment of these posts brought in people from tribes in other areas, including my own tribe. I'm Mohawk. And it is known that Mohawk people came with Hudson's Bay people to this area. I'm not sure if you're aware that when Vancouver arrived in the Puget Sound and encountered Nisqually people, he saw people who already had smallpox scars on their faces. European disease made it to these areas long before Europeans did. And so there had already been a great deal of cultural shifting due to decimation of populations and the introduction of trade goods. So it was a very populous Nisqually village to begin with, very resource rich. Even up through Leonard's childhood in the 1940s, 1950s, it was extremely resource rich. Okay. So Hudson's Bay came in and established Fort Nisqually kind of as a waypoint, and its subsidiary, the Puget Sound Agricultural Company, was producing agricultural goods for the other Hudson's Bay establishments. There were a couple of Hudson's Bay establishments that provided food for others. It not only brought in other indigenous and European peoples from the mainland, Hawaiian people were brought over as well by Hudson's Bay. And I mentioned this because one of Leonard's ancestors is John Kalama. And John Kalama married the daughter of a man known in English as Chief Martin. And his longhouse was in between Sequalitchew and the Nisqually River. And so Leonard was very proud of his Hawaiian heritage. And Kalama, as you know, is a town in Washington, and that's also named for John Kalama, and that would be Leonard's great-grandfather. So great-grandfather? I may have lost a generation there. In any event, Sequalitchew was kind of a metropolis and a multi-ethnic metropolis for, after European arrival. I'm sure quite a few of you are aware of post Hudson's Bay history on this landscape. One thing that I should perhaps pause on, when the Treaty of 1846 was enacted and the contemporary border between Canada and the United States was established, the United States took possession of former British possessions below the line, except for lands managed by the Puget Sound Agricultural Company, for example, and I think there were a few more exceptions. And so that Hudson's Bay subsidiary was active and operating within Sequalitchew, within DuPont, until I believe it was 1869 when their claims were paid out. I want to step back for just one moment again, back to the first meeting. Well, gosh, there's so much. I'm so sorry. And I've learned so much in the interim. The popular discourse about Chief Leschi of the Nisqually at the time was that he was Klickitat, half Klickitat. I want to speak to this for a moment because this part of history that's been shared with me subsequent to me writing the dissertation is pretty integral to understanding the establishment of Washington Territory, the subsequent Indian Wars of 1855 to 1858. Leschi was the son of a man from the village of Minter, and his mother was the daughter of a man we know as Weowicht. Now, Weowicht had many sons and daughters, and one of the ways that Coast Salish peoples and other Salish peoples, interior Salish peoples, express their status is, express and enact their status is by marrying outward. So Weowicht's over on the east side of the mountains. His daughter, Pornazita, marries at Nisqually. His son, Auchai, and Auchai's son, Qualchen, they're over here. A man named Kamayakin, who you may have heard this name before, very famous war leader from the east side. His mother was a daughter of Weowicht. It was a huge dynasty. It was a single family from Chehalis to at least Montana, okay? And when Isaac Stevens and his compatriots encountered, this tightly woven family and began drawing imaginary lines between families, this has really had a profound effect on contemporary tribal identity and contemporary tribal political stuff as well. So I just want you to realize that, this period is sometimes characterized east of the mountains as the Yakima Indian Wars, and on the west side of the mountains as the Puget Sound Indian Wars. This was a family, right? And it's very important to remember that. So, gosh, we're not going to have enough time for me to do this. So Sequalitchew, Hudson's Bay comes in. They get paid out for their claim. I'm going to skip ahead, almost, a little over, around 40 years to, oh, no, sorry. The first meeting of the territorial legislature in 1853, a man named A.J. Bolin bursts into the meeting to state that he had discovered gold on the beach at Steilacoom. Okay. I want you to hold that notion in your head for a little while, and I'll return to the matter of gold within this landscape. So skipping ahead now to 1906, when the DuPont Corporation established a munitions factory and enclosed it. They were manufacturing dynamite for domestic uses. They were doing this munitions manufacturing in lead-lined buildings, and I believe arsenic-laden and other heavy metal-laden herbicides were being applied to the narrow gauge railroad tracks in order to keep them clear of vegetation. And when the DuPont plant was decommissioned in 1977, they burned the lead-lined buildings. And of course, that contamination spread across the landscape in Sequalitchew. After the decommissioning, Weyerhaeuser obtained, it's over 3,000 acres encompassing the DuPont property and additional land. Their intent in the 80s was to establish a deep water port and log export facility. And when the bottom fell out of the timber market, they turned to real estate and planned community development. And thus was the genesis of Northwest Landing, right? Oh, back to 1906, because the mine is central to what's going on today. Mining has been active in DuPont since 1906 with the Seattle Sand and Gravel Company, I believe it's called. It, to some degree, has remained the same company under many different shell names. And we'll return to that. So just know there's this additional industrial exploitation of this ancient Nisqually village happening as early as 1906. What else did I want to do? So Weyerhaeuser gets the property, bottom falls out of the timber market, and they decide to get into real estate and plan development. Thus comes Northwest Landing. In order to proceed with that, however, the toxic contamination caused by the DuPont Corporation had to be remediated in certain areas. Many of these areas contained ancestral burial locations, according to Leonard. Now, I had begun working with Leonard because my partner, Chris, had been partially raised out at Nisqually and had said to me one day as we were trespassing across what was then Fort Lewis to go fishing, that we were actually on the Nisqually Reservation at that point. And because he had grown up out there, and he's non-native, by the way, I asked him to bring me out to the people who helped raise him so that I could learn more of this history. So initially, when I met Leonard, my discussions with him centered around the theft of the eastern 2/3 of the Nisqually Reservation by Pierce County and the subsequent offering of this stolen land to what was then the Department of War in the hopes that they would establish a military base in Puget Sound. The external boundary of the Nisqually Reservation still exists, and JBLM is illegally occupying those lands. And again, I want to reiterate, I am speaking as one of the inheritors of Leonard's knowledge, not as a representative of the Nisqually tribe. Okay, I'm going to be very, very, very clear about that. So many ancestral grave sites, according to Leonard, had been remediated along with toxic soil. Now, before I knew that, Leonard had asked me to take him for a drive one day, and this is in the dissertation, Sean. And I didn't even have a license, and I'm driving his hoopty old car, and he's directing me where to go. And we pulled over, I can't remember the street. It's by the 1843 cemetery there in DuPont, 1843 HBC cemetery. And we pulled over on the side of the road and opened up the car door to get out, and it squeaked really loudly. And, I was about to laugh because it was very quiet in the neighborhood, and that car door just screamed. And all of a sudden, all I could feel was just this wave of incredibly intense sadness and like pressure. And I just looked at him and I said, "What happened here?" And he said, "You can feel that." And I said, "How do you not feel this?" what happened here? And that's when he began to tell me about the remediation and the desecration of ancestors. And at that time, he was not only attempting to protect this land from Weyerhaeuser, attempting to protect this land from subsequent development by Intel, attempting to navigate outside of the framework of tribal government in order to protect this place. Because at that time, the tribe wasn't as invested in these things as he was. And so it was very important to him that the desecration of this landscape be documented and presented to the world, because he needed help stopping it. And I was just an undergrad at Evergreen at the time. And I know I'm not talking about Nisqually history right now, but stuff comes from the heart when you're working without a script. Or it falls right out of your head when you're talking. That's the other thing that happens. But he wanted this story out there. And, you know, I'm an undergrad. I don't know how to do anything. All I could think of is, you know, we got to get this out to the media. And we made, I don't know, 30, 40 media packets and sent them everywhere we could think of, including, and also to like reaching out to the Native American Rights Fund, reaching out to different indigenous organizations that work on sacred site protection. And, you know, we didn't get any kind of response to that. And we tried to work for years around it. And when it, you know, when the roadblocks became too much, I diverted my work for a time to Skokomish. And then Leonard had numerous instances of just about dying and coming back. And there was one time when it was extremely serious and he was in a coma. And when he awoke and we got him home, I asked him what he wanted to do, and he only had one word for me, and that was DuPont. And so, you know, it became my mission to get whatever qualifications I needed in order to be able to have people listen, right? So this dissertation documents this history and documents where both, you know, in addition to Weyerhaeuser's use and exploitation of this landscape, talks quite a bit about the mine, because at the time that I was writing it, it was, you know, 2011, 2012. And they were looking at that time to expand into the South Parcel and dewater the Vashon Aquifer and all of the things that are on the table today. And so let's talk about the South Parcel and get back to the gold for 1 second. The South Parcel, at least at that time, and I haven't had time to dig back into the assessor's records, and I can't, you know, honest, I'm exhausted. I can't remember if there's an actual transfer that takes place. In any event, it is well documented in the assessor's records that Weyerhaeuser has reserved its rights to recover gold out of the mine. Now, if A.J. Bolin in 1853 is visibly seeing gold on the beach at Stillicum, this isn't a small amount of gold we're talking about, okay? So I want people to be aware of the many-headed hydra that is active here, okay? Talking about the warehouse project, for example, Old Fort Lake, there's burials at Old Fort Lake, documented burials at Old Fort Lake. As I mentioned earlier, there are particular cultural and spiritual practices connected to these glacial kettle lakes. Archaeologists don't know of these things, okay? The cultural resource work that has historically been undertaken in DuPont is beyond substandard. my very recent former boss, Guy Mora, is one of the archaeologists who was working out here, working behind Richard Doherty's back to document things that Weyerhaeuser did not want documented. We look at the transport of contaminated soils on interstates to other states, Oregon, and I can't remember it might have been Idaho, where the soils were treated off-site, soils containing human remains. There was no federal approval of the transport of these toxic materials on interstates to other states. Had there been, there would have been what's called a federal nexus, and there would have been stronger cultural resource protections that would have kicked in relation to that remediation, instead of it being approached under the Model Toxics Control Act, which is a state law, right? There's a lot here, man. I could go on for weeks, but understand that these intertwined exploitations of this landscape, these are not separate things. Okay, let's talk for one moment about the restoration of Sequalitchew Creek as remediation subsequent to the devastating mining of this landscape, mining of gravels that are essential to salmon gill function. After you've put all this money into salmon restoration, you're going to dewater that aquifer. Oh, but don't worry. We'll give you a nice plastic remanufactured creek, right? That's not restoration. That's watershed engineering. Okay? Don't fall for that. Don't fall for that. I find it absolutely abhorrent, the millions and millions of dollars that the tribe and states and the state and the feds have poured into salmon restoration and estuary restoration and are about to. But they're going to dewater the aquifer. This is a money game. This is a money game. And I don't even know who's in the audience here. I put myself on the line for this place because that's what Leonard expected of me.
Go
ahead.
Probably as many people online and me.
And as you can see, this still remains to this day really emotional for me.
I have to tell you, I also have a lot of family history and am a historian for the descendants of Fort Nisqually.
Oh, are you Mary
I'm
Ann?
listening and nodding. Yeah.
Oh, good. I am on your page. Thank you. It's good to meet you. Yeah, guys, ask your questions because I could go on for 800 more pages.
Okay, I got first question.
Yes.
I've been saving it. I wrote it down.
Oh,
about the oldest shell midden.
Yeah.
You didn't say where it was. My family had a shell midden on their property, just around to the west of McAllister Creek, Medicine Creek.
Yeah.
There's a oyster place there on some of the, and Nisqually Land Trust has the lagoon now.
Yeah.
Because we knew there was shell midden on there. So my sister, brother, and I talked my mom into not developing it, but selling it to the land trust.
Beautiful.
So
beautiful.
Each crest has one down on their little marina too, which probably is mostly washed out, but it's there.
Yeah. The one that I'm referring to, I believe, is at the salt water. So
there's this near Sequalitchew Creek.
Let me, this is a little touchy here. Hang on just one second. Let me bring up this map, and if it wants to open for me, there it is. And I'm not going to get too specific here. Let me get back to Zoom. Could I attempt to share my screen real quick?
Sure. Does it have share?
Yeah, it has the button. Here we go.
Okay.
I had initially thought I would share this with Sean for promotional purposes, but then I thought, there's a little too much sensitive stuff going on here. But I believe, and it's been a long time since I looked at this stuff, but I believe this is where we're talking about. Okay, more by the island here. All right, and I'm going to stop sharing now. Where is stop share? I got pause share. Stop share. There we go. Okay. So yeah, and it's not the only midden out there. And not, not only in this landscape, but really anywhere in Washington post 1990, archaeology is driven by development, right? Nobody does research anymore. It's all about project clearance. So it's very hit and miss sampling this landscape in order to get a sense of human use. So just
That's
know
where I
that
admit writing to some cultural resource people that reply to planning and land services and telling them off for missing things.
yeah.
Yes, I've told off tribal members. You missed something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And believe me, in the work that I have been doing for 10 years with regard to green energy development on the east side of Washington state, it's a million times worse.
And all the historical documents about the northern side of the Sequalitchew Creek.
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
Colmy was trying to protect it from everyone, saying, don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it. And then the railroad just made a mess of it.
Well, and you have to go back to, I can't remember the name of the man who had the donation land claim on the north side of the creek, and the documentation of him desecrating burials, right? Canoe burials, ground burials. I mean, there's still people or their remains scattered through that area. We know this.
I walked through it, saw some bones, took some pictures, and I swore that they weren't animal and nobody would listen to me.
Yeah, that's a known burial location. It's, this was Leonard's life's work. Nobody, we did this work out of our own pockets. He devoted his life to this. Nobody would do this if he was just making it up.
What's Leonard's last name?
Squally.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But nobody would listen to him. I was absolutely stunned when the tribe reached out to me a year and a half ago and said, will you please come talk to us about Uncle's work?
And I know what you mean about going to a place and feeling something.
Yeah.
I've done that also at Civil War sites and had to ask my cousin, okay, what happened here?
Exactly.
This is peace soup.
Yeah.
In some places.
Right. It gets thick. It gets thick.
Yeah.
So
and I have pictures of so many ghosts around. I have a file called
They show themselves to you.
They show themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
To the camera.
Right. So yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Hi.
Hey, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it, and appreciate you showing up very authentically and with emotion. The way I think a lot of us are seeing this is that there's this site where they want to build a warehouse. A few of us, Vicky and I, went out to speak against it. Some other folks were there, and then there's the south parcel. And if those two sites are mined, the aquifers watered, the warehouse is built, I mean, there's no Sequalitchew Creek left.
Yeah.
So,
No.
I mean, our question is like, how can we like help tribe or help community members demonstrate the archaeological significance of these sites to stop the development?
Are any of you local residents of DuPont, first of all, or are you more broad throughout the
Renee Buck is part of this group. She's not here, but she is in DuPont.
This is Chris Barnes. I'm a resident of DuPont. I'm an ex-city council member.
Oh,
whose
yeah.
fingerprints are all over this mess. I'm here to, learn and figure out what we can do.
Thanks, Chris.
To move forward.
A few years ago when there was another warehouse proposal, one of the residents of DuPont reached out to me and asked if I would come and speak before city council. And I did. And again, made it clear that I'm presenting the perspectives of Leonard, not the tribe. And so kind of in response to you, Sean, you know, let me take those questions back to the tribe. You know, I can't make that call, but certainly, even without, you know, even just knowing that this landscape is of incredible historical and cultural significance to Nisqually people, to descendants of Fort Nisqually, to the territory or the state of Washington, and the history of the Pacific Northwest. You know, these things are all tied to the fact that this was a very rich Nisqually village, right? Let me put those questions to the folks I'm contracted with, and see if they might offer some guidance, or if they themselves might want to come and speak.
Thank you.
So yeah.
Need every tool that you can fight back.
Yeah, we all do. We all do. The tribe is very vested and actively commenting on these projects, and that's about all I feel comfortable saying. So just know that there is absolutely fertile ground there for allyship, comradeship, you know, collective good action to protect this very, very important place.
Need to know too that the Chambers Clover Creek Watershed group, that's just a kind of a council of organizations, but they're having board meetings every week right now because they got their issues forum coming up on the 20th.
Mm-hmm.
And the meeting on Monday, Renee Buck, who is in DuPont, and Al Schmouder were really grilling Tom Kantz of the Pierce County Stormwater about groundwater. Yeah. And they forced him to admit there is no one in Pierce County tracking availability of groundwater or construction. Nobody. So we're going to dewater an aquifer not knowing that we already don't have enough water or not.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, because that's not just going to affect DuPont. That's going to affect more of the county than just DuPont.
Absolutely. Absolutely,
and
it is.
So it's somewhat unfair that a lot of people in other places of the county don't realize they should be in DuPont complaining too.
Right.
About the risks.
Absolutely.
Besides the cultural resource risks, which is huge.
They're all related. They're all related, certainly from an indigenous perspective, right? Salmon are a cultural
What
resource.
they dug up for Center Drive was a total travesty.
The 28 burials? There was supposed to be a sign commemorating their presence that was promised to the tribe.
And then they didn't do it because they felt that someone would try to dig them up? I don't know.
Well, you know, initially Doc Doherty claimed that they weren't native because there were nails in their coffins. Like, can you take your ethnocentrism out of the room, sir? Or can you stop being Weyerhaeuser's whore? One of the two. It was really, really bad out there in terms of the cultural resource management. And Weyerhaeuser CEO John Creighton, who then became port commissioner and United Airlines guy, his wife Janet Creighton wrote her dissertation under Doc Doherty, lifting entire pages of his cultural resource report into her dissertation because, well, she wanted to be an archaeologist. Right? She's lucky she was old when I found this out. Let's just say that.
It's too bad my mom's not around. She helped fight the Deepwater Port along with Ken Braggett.
I love Ken Braggett. Yeah, she should have been stripped of her degree for that, by the way. But you know, she's John Creighton's wife.
If I could maybe, I think we have about minutes left. I think there's two important points to hit on. One is we could speak a little bit about the historical character of Sequalitchew Creek and the historical salmon run, and the other one is maybe if you could manage it. I know there's not a lot of time, but talk about the diversion canal on JBL Lab and Block.
Oh man, Oh, I wish I would have had these questions beforehand. I don't know that I have ready answers to that. I know there were salmon in Sequalitchew Creek. Um, you know, red salmon slough, which is just to the south. And I believe all 5 species of salmon come into red salmon slough, if I remember. I remember the all 5 somewhere in that dissertation. I'd have to go back to it and look. Diversion canal, is that Edmonds? No, that's, I gotta think.
It's what blocks the outflow from Sequalitchew Lake. It blocks the flow.
Yeah, I,
A lot of pictures of the dam.
right. I need to dive back into the Enviro docs, to really give you any kind of valuable response to that.
I can give you pictures of the old dam on Sequalitchew Creek.
Oh
The
gosh,
powerhouse.
yeah. Oh man, I have to be very careful here. I don't know how much I should say, but it became apparent, and I know I do express it in the dissertation, and it is public access, that there are certain employees of the Nisqually tribe who were working at cross purposes, and without tribal authorization to represent the tribe regarding salmon issues. I don't want to say more than that right now. So I wish I could bring someone. Well, I think maybe, you know, the people that I'm currently working with may have, you know, more concrete answers than I will have at the moment. But if we want to, I can dig in and get back to you in a couple of weeks or email you something.
I appreciate that. I think that I've heard that, you know, salmon would swim spawn in the lake historically. They even spawned Chinook in there.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
for your dissertation, that the Howard Creek was about to run a lumber mill, guy that was squatting on the launching.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, hard to imagine.
There was big plans for a mill there. That was one of the ones told.
Right, right. He set up his own mill. He set up his
Well,
own.
and that's why they had the dam there. There
Yeah,
was a lot of water. But when they did that diversion canal, I mean, it was taking all the water and Sequalitchew was dry.
right, right.
It was
And the
very,
same thing will happen here, and those seeps will dry up. And yeah, you can't dewater an aquifer and not affect the entire watershed, if not larger. And that, you know, that's my perspective on the area that should be looking at in these environmental documents, right? It's not the mine footprint. You're impacting a huge area here.
yeah,
That is what
more
needs
than
to
the
be
mine.
analyzed, right?
Well, Karen, thank you so much. If you have any last closing remarks, I want to.
As far as I stand, I look forward to helping you connect with people at the tribe who can strategically help guide and support your work, and, you know, engage in this what were we going relationship of reciprocal sustenance, as I call it in the dissertation, right? We all want the same thing for this landscape. So I want to thank you for your care. I want to thank you for your dedication to the health of this place. And I want to promise you that I will do everything that I can to connect you with the right people at Nisqually. And I mean, your own roommate can do the same, or the same thing, right? But I you know, I can do it at a more official level, right? So know that I will be actively making that effort. And yeah, hi Sean. And yeah, I look forward to meeting in person and talking further about these things, and seeing how I can support both of your works, right?
Great.
Thank you so much. I think there's a lot of opportunities to organize here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Especially you, Chris, for being here, man. Not especially, but uniquely, Chris. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I am deeply grateful that you came and talked to us, and having moved here with a young family, because it is a beautiful, special place. It really means a lot to me that you are willing to share what this place really means and how we can help save it.
Awesome. I will work hard to make this work. This is part of my life's path, and to see Sequalitchew come roaring back to life in this way, there's a reason. There's a reason we're all coming together. So I appreciate you, and we'll talk soon. Okay.
Thank you
Great.
so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. You bet.
Applause.
Aw, none of that. None of that. No, I'm gonna leave you to your meeting because I'm tired.
Okay.
Take care.
Wow.
I know, that was,
A lot of history.
That was amazing.
Yeah, that area is just absolutely thick with history.